Welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Jaden Schaefer. Guys, today on the podcast, Amazon has just put AI health in front of 200 million Prime members. They're doing prescription management, lab results, appointment booking. All of that is going to be happening through the Amazon app. We also have a story about AI money in politics. There is a new PAC that is backed by Trump allies. They're preparing to drop $100 million in the midterms to push pro-AI deregulatory agenda candidates. Waymo has just crossed 500,000 paid rides per week, which is an absolutely huge number when you think about where they were just a year ago. Mistral, the French AI company, just locked down $830 million for a massive data center build out. And then I think one of the biggest stories, we've been talking a lot about the fact that OpenAI has officially, announced that they're going to be killing Sora, their video model. And a lot of people are like, well, they're trying to focus to compete with Anthropic. We find out the story is actually wilder than you could ever imagine. We're going to break down how much Sora was costing them. It will probably make you cry, and basically why they're going to be pulling the plug on this, when, and all the details about that. So let's get into the podcast. Before we get into the stories, a quick mention for AI Box, my very own startup. If you haven't checked it out already, we have now upped it to over 70 AI models in one place that you get for $8.99 a month. So just like ChatGPT or Claude, you talk to all of the top models, including Gemini, Grok, 11 Labs for audio, tons of different image and video models, including OpenAI's Sora, which more on that in a second. But you can describe any workflow that you want to do in plain English. It's going to build it, link together different AI models. You can chat with them all in one place. It's only $9 a month. And basically, you save a ton of money and get everything in one place. So I've left a link in the description if that sounds interesting to you. I'd love for you to try it out. Let me know what you think. All right, the top story I want to talk about, or the first one, is Amazon's Health AI agent. They've just rolled this out to over 200 million Prime members. And essentially, this is something that they launched inside of the One Medical app back in January, but now they've expanded it to everything on Amazon.com. So, when you talk about distribution and kind of Google's distribution moat with something like a Gemini model, this is kind of Amazon's big play here. There's about 200 million US Prime members now that have access to this health agent. So it's not just for free people, it's for actual paying Prime members, but there's over 200 million of those. So what can it actually do? It can answer your health questions, but ChatGPT can do that. Where I think it gets exciting is that it can interpret your lab results. It can manage your prescription renewals. Remember, OpenAI or Amazon works directly with they have their own kind of pharmacy and health area. It can also book appointments with One Medical providers. So they have, a whole network of medical providers, and this is tied straight into this. This is something that I think that I'm excited and interested in, because beyond like Claude and OpenAI both have kind of put these dedicated health sections on their apps where you can like sync up your like sleep tracker or whatever to try to like get ideas, or your Apple Watch to try to get ideas on and input on your health. This is interesting to me because it goes a step further and it vertically integrates with lab results, prescription renewals, appointment bookings with actual medical providers. Like, it's really, beyond just, you chat with AI, but then there's steps you actually take. So I think this is really, really powerful. Prime members are getting up to 5 free direct message consultations with a licensed provider for common conditions like allergies, UTIs, cold, flu, even skincare. This is something I know my wife personally would love, and I think a lot of people, where you do these teledoc things, you get like actual direct messaging with actual licensed providers. And it's interesting because, yes, there's like an AI kind of secretary that ties it all together and they can give you ideas, but they're bringing it straight to a licensed provider for more in-depth stuff. So I think this is kind of an interesting human in the loop with AI, but in a highly regulated area. And I mean, you're getting prescriptions. It's not like the AI is going to just fully do your prescriptions for you. I think this is fantastic. This is really interesting. Amazon already has all of your shopping data and your pharmacy data in the Amazon Pharmacy. So now it's going to be able to pull in your health records through your state health information exchanges. There's tons of personal information that is flowing into one ecosystem, and I think this makes it a lot more convenient to use. It's not like a random teledoc where you got to fill out all this info. They already have all your info. You make a chat with it. You go talk to a licensed professional, and then you get all of your your prescriptions or anything else that you need after that. So I think this is Amazon doing what Amazon does best, which is really trying to make this frictionless in healthcare. So really, really big play. The next thing I want to talk about is a pro AI PAC that is planning to spend $100 million on the midterms. There's a new political group called Innovation Council Action. It's led by the former White House Deputy Chief of Staff Taylor Budwick, and it's closely tied to Trump advisor David Sachs. They are planning to spend over $100 million in the 2026 midterms, and their goal is basically to back candidates who support AI deregulation and oppose anyone who's pushing for stricter AI rules. We've seen people like Bernie Sanders and AOC saying, hey, we got to stop all data centers in the United States from being built. And I think, there's probably maybe people extreme on both sides of the aisle when it comes to like AI regulation or deregulation. And so it seems like they're pushing for trying to get people that would deregulate everything. They've developed a scorecard ranking where lawmakers are kind of based on their alignment with the administration's AI agenda, and that scorecard is going to guide where the money goes. And this isn't happening in isolation. When you add it to other groups, there's Leading the Future. They've raised $50 million from Greg Brockman over at OpenAI. There's Joe Lionsdale. There's Mark Andreessen. Plus, there is a Meta-backed super PAC, which is expected to spend $65 million at the state level. Total AI-related election spending is now going to be over $300 million. And I think this is one of those stories that really, like, it's flown under the radar. I don't see tons of people posting about it, but I think it matters a lot. AI regulation is going to be shaped by whoever's in Congress next year. And so the industry is trying to make sure that they have a seat at the table. And whether you think, maybe this is a healthy engagement or it's kind of outsized corporate influence, I think that's, all depending on your perspective with it or your political persuasion. But I think either way, the scale of the spending is very, very significant. The next thing I want to talk about is Waymo, that has just crossed 500,000 paid robotaxi rides per year. I think if we kind of put that into, per week. So putting that into context, they were at 50,000 per week in May of 2024 and 250,000 per week last April. So a year later, they've now doubled from 250,000 to 500,000 in actually, I guess, technically less than a year, and more than tenfold in the last 2 years. They're now operating in 10 different U.S. cities, the original 3, Phoenix, San Francisco, and L.A., plus they have 7 Sunbelt cities they added in the last year: Austin, Atlanta, Miami, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Orlando. I think what's interesting is their fleet size has stayed about the same. It's about 3,000 vehicles. So they're getting significantly more rides out of each car. And it's interesting, right? It's like, oh, they're rolling out in a new city. Probably they, put new cars. Like, basically the fleet size is the same. They're just spreading them out to new places, and they're getting a lot more rides. I think this is basically showing you that the routing, the utilization software, it's getting a lot better. And it's not just that they're launching it in new places. Their target is 1 million rides per week by the end of the year, which means that they need to double again in 9 months. Definitely it's ambitious, but I think given where they've come from in the past, I don't think it's unrealistic. I think the Waymo is this kind of idea of Waymo right now. It's getting, I think, it's very underestimated, because basically it's not super flashy. There's no dramatic launch events. There's not a lot of viral demos. I mean, we've all seen Waymos around for a long time, and maybe I'm just speaking because I've lived in Phoenix for the last 5 years, and I've been seeing them all drive around for the last 5 years. They seem like this kind of funny, clunky cars with these spinny things on top of them. But their growth is really starting to compound, and I think this is a massive win for Google. And I think they're at a point now where, 500,000 paid rides is a real, every single week is a real business. If they hit 1 million by December, they're going to start comparing eventually we'll just start comparing them to Uber and Lyft in certain markets. Because, compared to how many rides Uber and Lyft are doing in, let's say, Phoenix, like, this is a huge chunk. Now, I think there's a lot of ways to go. I think they'll have a lot of competitors, perhaps Tesla's robotaxi that's been kind of long talked about. I've never tried one, but perhaps as that scales out, there'll be more competition there. But I think people are getting more comfortable with these. And personally, I actually take Waymos when I go to Phoenix sometimes. Sometimes it's just like early in the morning. I don't want to talk to a person at 2 a.m. So I'm just like, I'll just take a Waymo. But when I took it in the past, it wasn't on the freeway. It was the back road. So it took like 15 minutes longer than normal. And I was like, okay, well, Uber does have an advantage for now. But as soon as the Waymo can ride on a normal road like the Teslas are doing, I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be an interesting shift in that entire industry. The next thing I want to talk about is that Mistral has just raised $830 million. This is the French AI startup. They're basically Europe's answer to OpenAI. They're Anthropic, but they're open source. They just secured all of this money. It was in debt financing. So this is their first major debt raise, and the money is going towards a data center near Paris. It's going to have up to 13,800 NVIDIA GB300 GPUs, there's going to be a total capacity of about 44 megawatts. So it's expected to come online in Q2 of this year, which is very quickly. 7 different banks have backed this deal. There's BPI France, BNP Paribas, Credit Agricole, HSBC, La Banque Postal, MUFG, and Natixis. This is a bit, I guess, basically on top of the 1.2 billion euro data center plan in Sweden that they announced in February. And I think their overall goal is 200 megawatts of compute capacity across Europe by the end of 2027. It's interesting. Some of these, basically, I mean, they're LLM models, and they were very hyped, and a lot of people talked about them and wanted to invest in them. And they grew to like these huge valuations and sizes. And then it just felt like the next step was like vertically integrating. They're going to start building the actual data centers. It's their biggest cost. And so they're going to try to bring that down by building the actual data centers themselves. Well, not their biggest cost, one of their big costs. I think there's 2 things that are interesting. First, the fact that they raise this as debt, not as equity. I think that tells you that traditional lenders are now viewing AI infrastructure as kind of like bankable asset classes, not just kind of like a speculative tech bet. Banks are underwriting AI compute the way that, you know, they'd underwrite like a power plant or a real estate project. I think that's a big shift right there. We know that these data centers are going to be in high demand, and so even if, you know, theoretically Mistral went out of business or their model wasn't super popular, they could just turn around and rent those data centers back to OpenAI or Microsoft or anyone else, right? These are a commodity that are hot, so they will give money to these big AI companies to basically build and control. I think it's also European AI sovereignty is an important part of this story. Mistral is one of the very few companies trying to build foundational AI models outside of the US and China. Whether they can actually compete at the frontier level is an open question. They have, you know, a very small amount of funding compared to OpenAI or Anthropic, but the fact that European banks are willing to put almost $1 billion behind this new data center effort says that, I mean, they are really serious in the region. So this will be an interesting one to follow for sure. The last thing I wanted to dive on was OpenAI killing Sora. This is something we've talked about a lot. You probably see this a lot. I was blown away. They've just released some of the numbers, some of the deadlines for when this thing's going to shut down officially. And I was blown away by the numbers on it. It will probably make you cry. So OpenAI is pulling a hard plug on April 26th, the API. So, you know, we've integrated Sora into AI Box, for example, so you can generate Sora videos on the platform. All of that is going to disappear and get permanently deleted. User data is going to get permanently deleted. The API is actually going to be accessible until September 24th. So AI Box will be able to host it and provide it to users up until September. But, you know, the web version and the app, those are all going to die, I mean, in just basically like 26 days. The reason for all of this is economics. So at its peak, Sora was costing OpenAI an estimated $15 million per day in inference costs. Guys, this is per day. So if you look at that annualized, that's about $5.4 billion. And that's just to keep the servers running. And so I guess like the number one question a lot of people are asking is like, how much revenue did this actually generate in its entire lifetime, right? How much money do people pay just to go try Sora? The answer is $2.1 million total. That's not a month. That is total. They have only generated $2.1 million from Sora subscriptions for the $15 million a day that they were spending. And if you look at how long this has been around for, I mean, this is billions of dollars to get that 2 million back. This is not good ROI for OpenAI. This is the craziest number of this whole podcast that you'll hear. Every 10-second clip of Sora that was generated cost OpenAI about $130 in compute. So think about that. If you've ever used Sora, which I went and generated a bunch of things on there, every single time you generated something, you wait a couple seconds, you get a 10-second video back, that cost $130. And you could, generate dozens of these things very quickly. So the downloads of their actual app peaked at $3.3 million or at 3.3 million in November last year. If that was when I think basically the hype for Sora was at its highest. By February, that dropped about 66% to 1.1 million. And so I think, it went very viral. A lot of people were curious and kind of playing with it, but it never really converted to any sort of sustained usage. I mean, I don't know if they even want it to because it costs so much money. It definitely never converted into any sort of enterprise revenue at scale that would justify all of that compute. And so I think the reason why this is so wild to me is that this is like more than just OpenAI. Like OpenAI is pulling the plug on this, but what's going to happen for, the economics of all of the other generative video companies? Sora wasn't like a bad product. The output quality was often pretty decent, but the compute requirements for video generation at that high level are on a completely different scale than text or even image generation. Like the cost curve hasn't come down fast enough. The demand, real paying demand also isn't where anyone hoped it would be. So it's like, there's not a lot of people paying for it. The quality is just so expensive. And I think this is going to be a force that every company working on AI video right now is going to have to reassess whether their unit economics can actually ever work, or whether video generation is just going to be fundamentally too expensive at the current hardware prices. And maybe the prices come down, right? Like maybe we make these models more efficient. Maybe we make hardware cheaper, and this kind of comes back in the future as something that we can do. But right now, with OpenAI pulling out, I'm curious to see if we'll see any others pulling out as well. Also, I mean, you could kind of look at this as like where are OpenAI's priorities right now. They just raised at a massive valuation. They have investors expecting returns. They're making, I think, a really smart call kind of pre-IPO to cut something that was burning tons of money, right? When you're a company, even when you're this big, you got to explain to your investors in your IPO how much money you're making, how much money you're spending. And when people see those numbers, I don't think it's going to look good in the IPO. It's very unsustainable, even though Sora was, one of the most high profile AI demos that came out of the last couple years, it just wasn't profitable. I think that's where the company is shifting from, just trying to like wow everyone with look at these cool things we can do, to like OpenAI right now has to actually build things that make money. I think whether you see that as a mature business discipline or kind of a loss of ambition probably depends on how you feel about OpenAI's trajectory overall. But I think the last takeaway for me on all of this is kind of the broader one, right? It's a clear example that right now there is a gap between what AI can actually do and what it can actually do profitably. We're kind of in this phase where some of the technical capabilities, they're going a lot faster than the business models can actually support. Models can, generate incredible video, but if every single one is going to cost $130 to produce and users aren't going to pay anywhere near that, then basically the technology doesn't really matter commercially, right? There's kind of this tension between capabilities and sustainability. I think it's going to define a lot of AI decisions this year. Personally, I think it'd be really sweet though if OpenAI open sourced Sora and let people run it on their own hardware. If it was, if it was good enough quality rather than just completely pulling the plug. I'll be curious to see what they do there. I think right now the question I'm watching is what's going to happen to the rest of the AI video space. Runway, Pika, Kling, they're all, Seed Dance, they're all working on really similar technology. And if OpenAI, with all of its resources, couldn't make the economics work, what does that mean for some of the smaller players, right? Some of them might find more efficient architectures, and I think that's what a lot of the Chinese models have done. They've kind of been forced to. And I mean, you have something like CapCut, which is rolling out Seed Dance video generation inside of CapCut, which is going kind of great to a massive audience. I think some are going to start to target more narrow, high-value use cases where customers were going to pay a bit of a premium. You can think like film pre-visualization, ad creatives for agencies, things where the output is worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars a clip. But this kind of like generate any video from a prompt for a flat subscription fee, I don't think that model is really going to work unless you have a good use case behind it. I think kind of the video ads is a huge one I see a lot, and I could see that having a lot of ROI. Someone's willing to pay, if you can make them a really good ad with their product, someone might pay $10 for that just straight out of a model, or go pay an agency, $1,000 for that. And so those unit economics, some of this could make sense. I think right now Sora is, proving that it just basically doesn't work economically. I think it also has a lot of questions about OpenAI's strategy. They've been expanding in basically every direction, right? We have text, image, video, voice, search, enterprise. Sora is supposed to be kind of just like a tentpole in their product. Shutting it down is basically, I think, an admission that not every frontier capability translates into a viable product. And I think I'm actually kind of happy about that. I think that's some good discipline as far as business goes. Definitely something to watch in the future. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the show today. If you got any value out of the episodes, I'd really, really appreciate it if you left a review, a comment on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. It basically helps us show out a ton to be found by more incredible people like yourself. And if you want to try out AI Box, check it out at aibox.ai. I'll leave a link in the description. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next episode.